Imagine waking up in a world where nothing seems to make sense. The news changes every minute, people argue about everything, and the slightest criticism can ruin reputations overnight. Anxiety seems to be the planet's official language, and the feeling that everything is out of control has become the new normal. But now imagine something else. Imagine waking up in that same world, and none of it affecting you. Not because you're cold, detached, or indifferent, but because you've discovered a way to live in which nothing from the outside has the power to determine your inner peace. That idea is so powerful, so absurd, and at the same time so simple that it shaped empires, inspired rulers, and comforted slaves. A philosophy that began with a shipwreck, passed through wars, emperors, centuries of oblivion, and resurfaced in full force in the 21st century, where it has become, ironically, one of the most effective weapons against modern anxiety. That philosophy is Stoicism. But what exactly is Stoicism? A moral code? A philosophy of life? A set of psychological practices? Or perhaps an ancient manual hidden in plain sight, waiting to be rediscovered by every generation that faces its own chaos? To understand that, we need to go back more than 2 millennia, to a time when philosophy wasn't studied in universities, but learned on the streets, taught by men who, before writing books, were trying to survive the real world. And it all begins with a man who lost everything. Zeno of Citium was a Phoenician merchant, owner of a ship loaded with Tyrian purple, one of the most valuable pigments in the ancient world. It was the kind of cargo that could change a man's life forever. But the Mediterranean Sea, as always, had no respect for human ambitions. A violent storm destroyed the ship, sank the goods, and left Zeno with nothing but the clothes on his back. Disoriented, poor, and adrift, he arrived in Athens. There, where many would see only despair, he saw opportunity. He walked into a small bookshop, perhaps seeking shelter, perhaps seeking distraction, perhaps by sheer chance, and found an entire world waiting for him. Zeno began to read about Socrates, the man who believed virtue was more valuable than any wealth, and that the true good was within us. It struck him like lightning. Socratic wisdom showed that losing external possessions does not mean losing yourself, and Zeno, who had lost everything, realized he still had what was essential. From that encounter, a shipwreck followed by a book, was born a philosophy that would change the fate of millions. Zeno began to study with different teachers, absorbing diverse ideas until he found his own voice. And when he finally decided to teach, he did not choose temples nor close schools for the elite. He chose the public colonnade of Athens, the Stoa Poikile, a place where anyone could hear his lessons. From there came the name of his philosophy, Stoicism. The philosophy of the colonnade, the philosophy for everyone. But what he taught wasn't gentle or comfortable. It was a philosophy for hard times, created by a man who knew the pain of loss and the fragility of life. A man who discovered that the only thing impossible to sink was character. For Zeno, life was simple, not easy, but simple. We do not control the world. We do not control events. We don't control the economy, politics, reputation, other people's behavior, the weather, or fate. But we do control how we respond to what happens. That was his discovery. The difference between suffering and serenity is not in the facts, but in the interpretations. That idea, so small and so radical, began to spread. Zeno drew students, then disciples, then followers, until his philosophy became a slow but powerful force that would travel through the Greek and Roman world. But Stoicism would not become great only because of its ideas. It would become immense because of the men who lived them. Some were born slaves, others died as emperors, and each of them would lay a different brick in the construction of this philosophy that, 2,000 years later, would be rediscovered in a world full of smartphones, social networks, crises, and uncertainty. A world that, ironically, needs Stoicism as much as Athens once did. Stoicism could have remained only a philosophical curiosity of Athens, one of those ideas that shine for a few years and then disappear forever. But fate had other plans. What Zeno began under the colonnade would be carried to unexpected distances by men who, like him, saw in philosophy not an intellectual refuge, but a weapon to survive the brutality of life. One of those men never knew freedom. His name was Epictetus, and he was born a slave. Imagine that. Being born into a condition where your entire life belongs to someone else. Where your talents, your words, your actions, even your thoughts can be punished. Where any hope of autonomy is only a delusion. That was the world Epictetus grew up in. And even so, he learned to be free in a way few men ever managed. Epictetus was enslaved by an imperial administrator in Rome, a violent man known for his cruelty. There are accounts that, in a fit of rage, he twisted Epictetus's leg with such force that it was left permanently deformed. It is almost impossible to imagine the pain, the humiliation, the injustice, and yet Epictetus was not destroyed by it. For he believed deeply that what they can do to your body can never reach the part of you that truly matters. From him comes the line that has thundered through centuries like a moral thunderbolt. It is not things that disturb us, but the opinion we have of them. And this wasn't theory. Epictetus lived that line every single day. When he finally gained his freedom, he devoted himself entirely to teaching. He believed that anyone, slaves, soldiers, rich, poor, could achieve inner freedom. And for that, they needed only to understand a simple but necessary distinction. There is what you control, and there is what you do not control. Almost all human suffering, he said, is born from confusion between these two regions. You don't control what people think of you, nor how they treat you, nor the tragedies that happen in the world. But you do control your response to all of that, and it is that response that defines who you are. That was Epictetus's key. True freedom begins where the illusion of control ends. These ideas spread among Roman soldiers and citizens, and they found an echo in another central figure of Stoicism, a man whose privileges were as extreme as Epictetus's sufferings, and who, even so, lived tormented. His name was Seneca. If Epictetus represents the Stoic soul born from adversity, Seneca represents Stoicism within power, surrounded by wealth, influence, and danger. He was an advisor to Emperor Nero, one of the most unpredictable and bloodthirsty rulers in Rome's history. He lived at a court filled with intrigues, betrayals, and luxuries that could make any man easily lose his sense of proportion. Seneca, in turn, seemed to live in permanent conflict. On one side, he was one of the richest men in Rome. On the other, he wrote about simplicity, moderation, and self-control. His life was a moral tightrope, and perhaps that is why his writings are so powerful. They are not sermons from someone perfect, but confessions from someone who fights daily against his own weaknesses. He said we waste most of our time on things without value, and that the problem isn't that life is short, but that we don't know how to use it. And he made it clear that virtue is not something you possess, but something you struggle for every day. If Zeno founded the philosophy, Epictetus gave it a soul, and Seneca gave it a voice. Marcus Aurelius would give it its definitive form. Marcus Aurelius was not a philosopher living in relative comfort. He was the most powerful man in the world. Imagine trying to live with serenity when the fate of an entire empire rests on your shoulders. Rome faced constant wars, devastating plagues, betrayals by allies, and personal tragedies. Every decision Marcus Aurelius made could save or destroy thousands of lives. And yet every day, late at night, he wrote to himself, not speeches, not orders, not decrees, but intimate reminders of how he should act. Those writings, gathered today under the name Meditations, are one of the most revealing documents in human history. They show us a man surrounded by chaos, begging himself to remain steady, just, and compassionate despite everything. He repeated that nothing deserves our attention as much as the mind itself, that everything that happens is smaller than the response we give, that the universe is constant motion, and resisting it is suffering, that no one can harm you if you do not allow it to enter your soul, and that a good life is simply a life guided by reason and virtue. Marcus Aurelius lived and ruled as if every act were a stoic exercise. There is no record that he abused his power, even when he could have done so without consequences. He believed deeply that a leader's example shapes an entire civilization. And so, through the lives of these three men, the slave, the senator, and the emperor, Stoicism demonstrated its true strength. A philosophy that serves both those who have nothing and those who have everything. A philosophy that survives luxury and misery, power and humiliation. A philosophy made for times of peace and times of despair. And that is perhaps why it returned with such force in the 21st century. Because we too are living through our own period of chaos, where we control almost nothing except ourselves. To understand the real strength of Stoicism, we now need to enter the center of everything that sustains this philosophy. Its ideas are not complex. On the contrary, they are so simple, they become almost uncomfortable. The Stoics believe that most human suffering is born not from external events, but from our inability to accept what does not depend on us. And that idea, though repeated by Zeno, Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius, only makes sense when you look at the world the way they did. The Stoics saw the universe as a great web of causes and effects, where every event, however random it may seem, is part of a greater order. Not a mystical order, but a rational one. For them, the world simply is what it is, and our struggle against that reality is what creates most of our pain. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, alone in his military tent, surrounded by enemies and epidemics, he remembered that. He told himself there was no point in wishing the universe were different. Winter will come, whether you want it to or not. People will disappoint you, whether you prepare or not. Death will arrive, whether you face it or not. The only real freedom is deciding how to respond to that. That distinction between what we control and what we do not control is perhaps Stoicism's greatest contribution to the modern world, and, at the same time, the hardest to practice. For centuries, wars were fought, empires fell, societies changed, but this truth remained intact. The human mind suffers more from imagination than from reality. Seneca said that we create our own torments. We suffer ahead of time. We suffer out of fear. We suffer from expectations. We suffer from losing what we never had. Our greatest enemy is not the world's tragedies, but the story we tell about them. And that is why the Stoics talk so much about reason, not a cold, mechanical reason, but a reason that illuminates, a reason that keeps us from being dragged along by violent emotions that end up destroying us. They did not believe we should eliminate emotions. They were not machines. They believed we must understand emotions, so we do not become slaves to them. Epictetus said that anger is born when we believe someone has harmed us. But if we analyze calmly, we will see that most insults are only an opinion. And we react as if it were a physical blow, when in fact it is only sound in the air. Seneca said exaggerated fear is a problem of imagination. We create monsters that do not exist, and then run from them as if they were real. Marcus Aurelius said sadness often comes from attachment to the past, and that nothing in the universe was made to remain still. The Stoics did not promise eternal happiness. They promised serenity, which is far more powerful. Being happy depends on circumstances. Being serene depends on you. It is that serenity that allowed a man like Epictetus, mutilated and humiliated, to affirm that he was never truly harmed. It is that serenity that allowed Seneca to move through Nero's court without going mad. It is that serenity that allowed Marcus Aurelius to govern a sick, war-torn empire without succumbing to despair. But there is another fundamental element in Stoicism, perhaps the most misunderstood: virtue. For the Stoics, virtue was not moralism. It was not following rigid rules or trying to be good to seem righteous. Virtue was a natural consequence of reason. It was living according to what you know is right, even when no one is watching. Zeno believed virtue is the only true good. Everything else, wealth, health, power, status, are only preferred but never essential. A virtuous man can lose everything and still be whole. A man without virtue can have all the goods in the world and still be miserable. For the Stoics, virtue is divided into 4 essential forms: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. These 4 qualities formed a balance that did not depend on wealth, education, or social position. A slave could be as virtuous as an emperor, and many were. Stoicism endured for centuries because it promised something no other philosophy delivered with such realism. Not the promise of controlling the world, but the promise of controlling yourself while the world changes around you. And that promise, as we will see, is the bridge that connects ancient philosophy with the chaos of modernity, where information moves faster than ever, where people's opinions have never been so volatile, and where anxiety has become an invisible epidemic. Stoic serenity, so difficult and so necessary, may be precisely what made this philosophy eternal. There is an aspect of Stoicism that has always struck people as strange across the centuries: the almost calm way its philosophers spoke about death. For them, death was not a distant event, hidden, denied, or feared. It was a constant companion, a silent presence that walked alongside every man from birth. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself that thinking about death was not morbid, but clarity. He said remembering one's own mortality made life lighter because it freed a man from the illusion of absolute control. When you accept that time is limited, offenses become small, ambitions unnecessary, and the weight of other people's expectations loses all meaning. No Stoic believed that living long was more important than living well. Seneca said, "Death is only the moment we return to the universe what was never ours, and that while we are alive, the wisest thing is to live without waste, without distraction, without allowing fear of the end to imprison us before the time comes." For Epictetus, fear of death was an error of judgment. He said we fear what we do not understand, and that death is no evil at all, but only a natural change. All of life is made of cycles, being born, growing, aging, and leaving, and none of those processes depends on us. The only power we have is to live with dignity within the time we have been granted. That serenity in the face of death did not come from cold detachment. It came from a deep awareness that life is fragile and therefore precious. But Stoicism is not only about accepting death, it teaches you how to live. And living, for them, was a daily exercise in discipline. The Stoic man woke up every day as if he were making a commitment to himself. Marcus Aurelius wrote at daybreak that he should begin the day prepared to meet ungrateful, selfish, arrogant, violent, and misguided people, and that none of it should change him. He said we cannot expect the world to follow our will. We must shape our will so it fits the world without breaking. That discipline was not made of brute force. It was built with small actions, a word spoken calmly, a desire restrained, a thought reorganized, a response chosen carefully. The Stoics believed character is formed in the details, not in the big moments. For Seneca, humanity's great mistake was believing spiritual disciplines only make sense in temples or books. He said the wise person's training ground is ordinary life. It is in traffic, at the dinner table, at work, in living with difficult people, in waiting, in frustration, in silence. It is in these seemingly insignificant settings that Stoicism is truly tested. Because it is easy to be virtuous when nothing provokes you. Hard is being virtuous when everything seems to push you toward the opposite. Zeno said virtue is not a state, but constant motion. It is not enough to know what is right, you have to practice it. And that practice takes time, takes mistakes, takes patience. The Stoics believed no one is born wise, but everyone can become so. And it is precisely this universal character of the philosophy that kept it alive for so many centuries. It belongs to no specific people, no historical moment, no religion, no social class. It is a philosophy built for the human being, any human being, who wants to live with more clarity, balance, and courage. But Stoicism did not survive only because of its philosophers. It stayed alive because it resonated with the lives of ordinary people. Roman soldiers carried passages of Epictetus engraved on small wooden tablets. Merchants learned from Seneca how to deal with financial losses without despair. Parents taught their children that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act in spite of it. And even emperors wrote to themselves that nothing, no victory, no honor, no title, was greater than control over one's own mind. That legacy crossed time like an underground river, flowing for centuries until it finally resurfaced in a world infinitely more complex, accelerated, and noisy than any Stoic could have imagined. And yet, its ideas fit perfectly into our time. Perhaps because, despite all technology, despite all change, the human being remains the same, vulnerable, restless, full of desires, full of fears, looking for some kind of order in the middle of the storm. Stoicism does not promise to eliminate the storm. It promises to teach you how to walk through it without losing yourself. And that promise, so ancient and so modern, remains what makes this philosophy one of the most powerful humanity has ever created. Over the centuries, Stoicism seemed to lie dormant. It did not disappear completely. Some medieval monks quoted Seneca. Some jurists used Stoic ideas to shape concepts of natural law. Some Renaissance philosophers tried to revive the discipline. But compared to its impact in the ancient world, it seemed like only a distant memory. Until we arrived at the 21st century, a century that moves too fast, where every minute we are bombarded with information, opinions, news, and emotions that are not ours. We live surrounded by stimuli our ancestors would never have been able to process. And more, the modern world creates a feeling of permanent instability. Stoicism found, in this scenario, the perfect ground to be reborn. Perhaps because we live in the age of distraction, and Stoicism is the philosophy of clarity. Perhaps because we live in the age of anxiety, and Stoicism is the philosophy of serenity. Perhaps because we live in the age of outrage, and Stoicism is the philosophy of self-control. Or perhaps because we live in the age of apparent abundance, and Stoicism is the philosophy of essence. The truth is, we have never been so materially free, and so mentally trapped. Stoicism understood that before we did. Think about the world Marcus Aurelius ruled. Wars on every border, epidemics devastating the population, political betrayals, deaths in the family, constant threats. And even so, he tried to find a point of balance within himself. Now think about our world, where often a simple opinion from someone on the internet can ruin a person's mood for days. The Stoics would say we have built invisible prisons and carry the keys, but we forgot where we put them. Modern anxiety has many forms, but almost all of them are born from the same source. We try to control things that are outside of us. We want to control what others think, what others do, the results of our actions, the future of the economy, public opinion, cultural changes, even the interpretation strangers make of what we post. And the more we try to control, the more fragile we become. Stoicism saw that 2,000 years ago. And that is why so many young people, professionals, athletes, entrepreneurs, and even psychologists have found in this philosophy a language that makes sense. If Epictetus were alive, perhaps he would say there has never been a moment in history when the human being was so exposed to the judgment of so many at the same time. And because of that, has never needed so much the basic distinction between what depends on us and what does not. The rebirth of Stoicism is not a fad. It is a return to something that has always been present, but that only now we realize we urgently need. At the same time, Stoicism did not become popular only because of its message, but because of its practicality. It does not require temples, rituals, gurus, complex meditations, or endless reading. It requires only continuous attention, a kind of gentle vigilance over one's own mind. Marcus Aurelius said that every day we should observe our thoughts as if they were visitors in our home. Some thoughts come in with good intentions. Others arrive to disturb. and it is up to us to decide which ones stay. In a world saturated with digital stimuli, that idea feels almost revolutionary. In addition, Stoicism offers something the modern world has lost: proportion. The ability to distinguish between what is truly important and what is not, between what deserves energy and what should be discarded, between what reveals character and what is only noise. Seneca said that what seems gigantic in front of us usually becomes small when observed from a distance. And today, more than ever, we live so close to problems that we lose any sense of scale. A criticism becomes tragedy. A delay becomes despair. A mistake becomes defeat. An anonymous comment becomes an existential threat. Stoicism teaches you to take a few steps back, to look at the whole, and to remember that the universe is far too vast for these small disturbances to have the power we give them. And perhaps that is why, after 2,000 years, Stoicism is more alive than ever. Not as an academic curiosity, but as a tool for psychological survival. Because, in a world that can change from one day to the next, where there are no guarantees, where every person faces invisible battles, this philosophy continues to be a beacon of rationality, courage, and proportion. A philosophy that reminds us that life does not need to be perfect to be bearable, and that serene is not the one who lives without problems, but the one who has stopped being their slave. If there is something Stoicism tries to teach us, from the days of Zeno to the lonely nights of Marcus Aurelius, it is that life is not something you control, it is something you move through. And moving through life requires courage. Not the heroic courage of generals or poets, but the quiet courage of keeping on walking, even when everything is uncertain. The Stoics never promised a just world. They never promised that pain would disappear, that challenges would be few, that people would always be reasonable. On the contrary, they believed life is full of frictions, setbacks, losses, and surprises, and that a human being's value is not in what he achieves, but in the stance he takes before the inevitable. That is why Stoicism speaks so much about character. Character is what remains when everything else collapses. It is what is left when fortune changes, when health fails, when circumstances slip from your hands. It is the part of us that does not depend on praise or recognition, because it is born from within. Zeno said the wise person lives in harmony with nature. And for him, living in harmony did not mean hugging trees or meditating in caves. It meant accepting reality as it is, without running from it, without distorting it, without demanding that it bend to our whims. Epictetus reinforced that nothing can truly wound a man who is truly free, because the free man is the one whose mind is not governed by passions, impulses, or other people's opinions. He can be insulted, he can be deceived, he can be defeated, but he remains whole, because his dignity does not depend on the actions of others. Seneca said each day should be treated like an entire lifetime, that we should live with intensity, but also with serenity, with ambition, but also with moderation, with firmness, but also with humanity. For him, happiness was not a permanent state, it was a side effect of living well. And Marcus Aurelius, perhaps the most vulnerable of all, would leave a final testimony that a man's greatness is directly tied to his ability to stay calm while the world around him collapses. That we are not responsible for external chaos, but we are completely responsible for not turning into something worse because of it. These ideas, written 2,000 years ago, speak directly to our time because, deep down, we are still facing the same fears. We fear loss, we fear failure, we fear judgment, we fear death. And the Stoics' words are like open windows in a dark house. They do not drive the night away, but they let the air circulate. What Stoicism offers us is not a perfect life, but a mind capable of finding tranquility even when everything seems out of place. It reminds us that we are not required to react to everything, that we do not need to absorb every criticism, or believe every fear, or carry every weight the world puts on our shoulders. We are the ones who choose what stays within us. And it is that choice, repeated day after day, that transforms anyone's life. It is not a philosophy that demands faith, but practice. It does not require you to change the world, only to change your posture toward it. Stoicism survived kings, empires, epidemics, and centuries of forgetting because it speaks directly to the human heart. And it remains alive today because, despite technology and progress, we are still fragile beings searching for some form of inner stability. Zeno, Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius did not have all the answers, but they found a way to move through the world without losing themselves. And they left that path open so that anyone can follow it. In the end, Stoicism is not about being invincible. It is about being unshakable. It is not about eliminating emotions. It is about understanding them. It is not about controlling life. It is about being able to walk through it with dignity, clarity, and courage. And perhaps after so many centuries, that is why we keep returning to this philosophy, because it reminds us that, despite everything, despite the chaos, despite the uncertainty, there is something within us that can remain at peace. And that peace, silent, disciplined, resilient, is the purest form of freedom a human being can achieve.